Metroid is a series that was established in 1986 by Gunpei Yokoi, Makoto Kano, and Yoshio Sakamoto for the Nintendo Corporation. Metroid is a franchise that has gotten a lot of love over the years, and Samus Aran is a fan favorite, especially in America. When Samus' first adventure began on the Nintendo Entertainment System, players were absolutely blown away by the journey of the world's first space marine on the planet Brinstar. What a lot of gamers didn't know at the time was that hardcore bounty hunter who took no nonsense from nobody was actually a woman. Samus has gone on to star in 10 full-length games, have a number of manga and novels, and of course one of the most iconic themes in gaming. Music to my ears. Now, what some people don't immediately recognize, however, are the biblical parallels that the series draws. I'm going to talk about Samus in 3 stages today. Samus the warrior, Samus the scholar, and Samus the mother. John chapter 1, verses 22 through 23 read, "Finally they said, 'Who are you? Give us an answer to take back to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?' John replied in the words of Isaiah the prophet, 'I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way for the Lord.'" Now the most recognizable face of Samus is that of the warrior. First and foremost, though, she was an orphan of 2 worlds. Her colony was wiped out when she was young, and she cried out in the wilderness. The Chozo took her in and raised her and trained her, teaching her their ways. They were preparing her for the trials that were to come. When she lost the Chozo, she joined up with the Alliance military. She eventually went on to become an amazing bounty hunter, saving worlds all over the place. But first, she was the voice crying out in the wilderness. Now there are some translations of the word that punctuate that particular scripture as, "I am a voice crying. In the wilderness make straight the way for the Lord." You see where they placed the comma there. No one expected that mewling babe to go on to do the great things that she did. But oftentimes people doubt that we'll ever grow out of our pains. Now, while Samus prepared the path for the Alliance to be safe and to march to freedom, she also bears similarity to Deborah and Jael of the Bible. Deborah was a judge leading Israel and spoken of in Judges 4, verses 5 through 9. She sent for Barak to gather his army of 10,000 and lured the commander of Jabin's army, Sisera, out into the open where he would be slain. Barak refused to go into battle, though, without Deborah marching with him. I mean, and think about that. This guy who was over this army was like, nope, without this woman, I'm not going into battle. Similarly, the Alliance refused to take any action on any matter without Samus, and Ridley, Kraid, and Mother Brain and the Space Pirates were wiped out because of her and by her hand. Deborah, by the way, means bee, or spirited or fiery woman. In other words, not someone you want to mess with. Jael, meaning wild gazelle, used clever deception to kill Sisera. Now, I mean, this is a scary woman. She didn't just kill him. She drove a tent peg, a stake, through the side of his head. I mean, can you imagine what that looks like? Hold on, I got a picture for you. I mean, tent peg, head, hammer. That's just awful. I mean, guys, you think your girl's scary when she's mad? Has she ever threatened to drive a tent peg through your skull while you're sleeping? Yeah, I think you've got it pretty good. Now, Samus is a bit more overt in her methodology, but the point still remains that an unconventional woman from an unconventional background with unconventional weapons ranging from the Alliance gear to what she received from her Chozo foster family continues to strike down fearsome enemies that no one else has the stonies to face off against. And that, these 3 women possess a courage that the boys certainly didn't. Now, as fun as Samus is when she's blowing everything to Kingdom Come, another side of her that isn't widely publicized is that she's far from a trigger-happy bounty hunter. The Metroid books and later the Metroid Prime series capitalized on the intelligent scholar therein. Samus understands that to win the battle, to win the war, you have to understand the terrain, the people, and the enemy. Samus typically never enters into a combat situation without researching and cataloging everything there is to know about her targets and their worlds. Numbers 13 describes the spies that were sent into the land of Canaan to survey the enemy prior to battle. Moses didn't just rush into war, he made sure to gather intel on not only the enemy, but the vegetation and domiciles as well. The 12 spies returned with a report, and the tribes were fearful of the Amalekites, Amorites, and Canaanites. Parallels, space pirates, Metroids, and the Chozo ghosts. They refused to go in. See, the Alliance turned tail and ran like cowards. Caleb was all, dude, let's go. God said it was ours, so it's ours. Samus was like, let's roll. Come on, you're the Alliance. But the tribes wouldn't back them. So they wandered for 40 more years in the wilderness. We're talking about the Israelites. Wandered for 40 more years in the wilderness. And you gotta wonder, how long did planets like Brinstar lay under siege because the Alliance was all lame and cowardly and like, oh no, they got aliens and guns and stuff. Ultimately, though, at the appointed time, the tribes fought and they took their land. When the Alliance decided that enough was enough, they sent Samus with the courage of Caleb to storm the gates, to go into the wilderness, and to make straight the way. Now, let's talk about Samus the Mother. This is another side that most gamers tend to ignore pretty much entirely, but it's also easy to forget since Samus has this coping method where she just bottles up whatever hurts her, locks it in a chest, and moves on thinking about it as rarely as possible, which we saw in Metroid Fusion. You know, not counting the basket of emotions that she was in the other M, which, can we just universally agree that that story didn't happen? Samus tends to move forward cold and stentorian. This is understandable though, given that she watched her parents and her entire colony get slaughtered by space pirates, then she watched the same thing happen to the race that raised her later on. And, depending on what story you read, Samus even endured watching her entire unit wiped out before she became a bounty hunter, so she developed this cold sort of detachment that allows her to just let everything roll off of her back like it's nothing. Still, there was one moment in particular that old school gamers can point to where Samus literally went berserk. Early in Super Metroid, a baby Metroid ends up imprinting on Samus and clinging to her like a mother. Samus is more annoyed by this than anything, especially since the Metroids are the race that she was called in to take care of, but she eventually comes to accept that it is what it is and lets the baby do its own thing. By the end of the mission, Samus has to throw down with the Mother Brain, once and for all, and it does not go well for her. In this particular battle, though, the baby Metroid does what any child would, seeing its mother getting beat down, and it rushes to her rescue. The baby takes this blast that was meant for Samus and is able to convert it into energy to restore her health and get Samus back into fighting form. But of course, the Mother Brain doesn't take this lying down. It goes over and just starts opening fire on the baby Metroid, who ultimately sacrifices its life to protect its mother. Now, at this point, we see Samus just lose it. And the baby Metroid converts the laser into a weapon that Samus can use, and it's one that we have not seen since then, a cannon that's fired entirely out of her rage. Now again, this weapon was never seen in any other Metroid game. It was used specifically at the moment that the child sacrificed its life for the mother, and fueled by this wrathful mother, the cannon obliterated this ultimate enemy that no other weapon would work against. Fueled by his love for us and his wrath against the enemy, God sent forth a living weapon the likes of which the world had never known before to battle and overcome an enemy that no other weapon could prevail against. But, you know what? Fight the Mother Brain twice. Only by the sacrifice of her child was she able to obliterate that enemy once and for all. Christ is coming back, and when he does, Satan doesn't stand a chance. Alright, so this has been Zayon R with Crosstalk Metroid Salvation. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'd like to give a shout out to Gilead Ministries, my home church in Anchorage, Alaska, and to Pastor Clifton J III, who is my pastor. Hope you guys have a blessed and wonderful week. Please do post in the comments, recommend the next game that you'd like to see. Look forward to seeing you guys later.